Mythology. You know, what's it all about? That's the question, isn't it? What's it all about? Why are we here? What's going on? All of that. I know I can only know that from my perspective, and even then, can I be sure that I know what I'm knowing is not an illusion? And that's the difficulty. As you're having your own single consciousness stream adventure, we could say, it's an experience. The only true thing that we can anchor to that is true is that we are actually having an experience. Experience is something that is, again, very profoundly difficult for us to be able to articulate what that is. I mean, try to explain what is experiencing. What is it? You know, it's as difficult as saying what is wet if you don't understand dry. And so we find ourselves in this binary consciousness that we're living, and myself becoming more and more aware after 30 years of seeking, having my awakening around the age of 20, and going into this incredible story with an awareness that is the mythology of who I am. You know, the only way in which our mythology can be understood is we have to tell the story. I'm not anyone more special than anyone else. Is my story relevant? Well, if my story is not relevant, then no one else's is relevant either. Because there seems to be, when it comes down to the brass tacks, as they say, there seems to be this collective agreement that the only thing that we know is going on is we're having an experience. Going any deeper than that, bringing any other questions to the table, is simply taking us down the rabbit hole. So what is the existence that I've had? And that's the only place that I can speak from. If I was to say I had any authority at all, and I cannot place my outer authority without first having an inner authority. And the word authority comes from the same root as author. So in order for us to truly understand each other, we must tell our stories. But how do we tell our stories? Do we tell it from a place of victimhood? Do we play it from a place of ego and, pent up self and aggrandizement of, being over congratulatory as if we are in control of things, if that makes sense? In other words, really feeling that we are the ones that are at the helm and we are in control. I mean, that needs to be investigated. And so if we go into, let's say, a first line theme as I share my mythology here, this is why, as I was just saying, why I feel that I need to share the story, because it's all going to change once I get to 50 and I have an awareness around that. There's a change that takes place, a metamorphosis, I guess, that's already taking place at this moment. But at the age of 50, on my Chiron return, there will be a crystallization of a new being. I'm a 6'3", projector. As a 6'3" projector, to which, really this understanding and knowledge of what I am has only come into my consciousness really just in the last while. I'd say 6 months to a year. I did know about it, but bringing it into a practical application, understanding my profile as in how this machine functions in this world, how it turns up, and understanding my body graph according to human design, which is the characteristics of the character that is being played. The character is my profile. I'm a 6'3", role model, martyr. I am a role model martyr. I only found out about this really recently, but it made so much sense when I look back over my story. And we must look back over our story, because it's actually, if we're to understand the future, you don't need a crystal ball to look into the future. You really just need a crystal ball to look into the past, because the past, oh yeah, I mean, it's, it's fractalized. We see patterns, crystallizations of the same vibrational expression that is this existence that we're having. And they have many facets. I mean, that's why I'm saying crystalline structures. They have facets, and those facets, when they come into contact or within close vicinity of another crystalline structure that has facets, then they reflect off each other. And that reflection, we could say, is our story. Knowing your story is knowing your mythology. And then once you understand, once your consciousness stream, once your consciousness witness is aware of the mythology of the being that it is passenger to, when that which is witness to it learns, it's working on another scale. It's that non-doing. It's that non-doing that gets it done. If we think about, the witness, it's not here to do anything. It's here to take notes. It's here to, truly understand what is happening through this crystallized, concretized structure and form we call the body and the life. And this body and the life, if there's any language in which we can understand to be able to communicate what it is geometry, first of all. These are geometric recognition that we have when we come into contact with any object. And the object is an interface. It's not the thing itself. We know that, okay, because the object must be part of the whole, and the whole must contain the object. And there can be nothing that is observed and seen that is not what is being observed and seen in return. So then what do we have? We have a reflection, as I say, the fractalized understanding of our story. I know that's heavy, and hopefully that made your mind let go. I'm going to tell you about my adventures as a 6/3 profile projector. Looking back, I can tell that's definitely what I was. Coming into this world and feeling very, very different, which is, what I can share in common with just about anyone. But there are people out there that don't look at that and realize, as they say, the black sheep or the odd one out. I didn't do things the same as anyone else. It's not that I caused trouble. I certainly wasn't a troublemaker, but I'm sure trouble was made without my intention. My way of doing things was never to ever harm anyone else, but I'm sure others were harmed. I could just about guarantee it. Because if we're going to be ourselves, truly be ourselves, the only others that we can get along with are others that are being themselves also. It is when you come into contact with someone that is not being themselves, that is being the not self, that's another entity altogether. It is a vehicle that has been hijacked by the witness consciousness. When the witness consciousness hijacks the vehicle, a life is lived out that what we call in human design the not self. And the hallmarks of the not self is dependent on your auric type and mechanics. For the generator, the not self is the experience of frustration. So frustration is not so much a emotional product of what's going on. It is a signpost of whether you are in alignment or not, whether you are at the correct altitude for the highest potential of your flight path. When you understand that, then, life begins to take on another whole vibrational expression. Again, it's not that it changes. Nothing changes. The only thing that brings the illusion of change, because everything is illusory, because it's very transient, and you'd agree on that. The only thing that gives us any sort of idea that anything is actually concrete and and crystallized is the fact that we're having to negate many, many truths, which is everything is actually illusory. You understand, okay, everything's illusory. So then can you identify with what is illusion? Well, probably not the best idea. And if you do, then you are literally just a part of the program that's being played, instead of being a witness to it. Then, and so just sitting there, I guess if you look at Tibetan monks, you look at Hindu gurus, all of those sort of things, you look at them, they disappear into the caves, and you think, well, that's amazing, you know, that's not living life. But when you are in your body and you are purely witnessing not just the body, but also the very background frequency in which the body is placed, then you come to understand that there's a lot more going on under the covers. Now, for me, maybe 20 years ago, I discovered there was more going on. 30 years ago, there was more going on under the covers. I had an experience that was nothing short of profound. And it was just 11:11 as I said that. This experience, it shook my cage, it really did. It dissolved my world, almost literally. I had an experience of being experienced. I had the experience of being experienced, but not as a thing, but definitely as vibration, if I could say that. There was nothing and everything in a space of no space. It happened in the supermarket. I mean, you know, when these things happen, when the mythology kicks off, you have to chuckle at the story. The story is quite amazing. It certainly is entertaining. In the supermarket, here I am, and the sound was like the sound of many rushing waters, to which I would be reminded of that much later when I joined the Christian church. Just feeling a draw to go there. Deep down, looking back now, knowing that it was but it was a path I had to go on. A beautiful path as well. But this moment in the supermarket where there was this kind of like this voice, but it sounded like the voice of many rushing waters, as the Bible says. It was like, I understand that terminology of many witnesses, thousands upon thousands, if not millions or billions, and on and on. Witnesses. It talks about that in the Bible. I found that out later as well. And everything, looking back from where I am here now, I can see how everything was locking into place. The reason I take you on this journey, and I'll go in and out of the story, is that is actually how we live our lives. We live our lives going in and out of the story, because there is a time to write the story. There is a time to live the story, and there is a time to experience and witness the story. And here's the thing. Those three parts take place on a quantum level all at once. It's called his story because it is talking about humanity in the individual sense. His doesn't need to be, that's why you look at the Bible, again, I learned this later on, Adam and created Adam and Eve, but created them as one being. And then the story goes with this kind of short story of how they were unfolded from each other, almost like if you look at the torus, the energy comes in and then it comes together, it literally comes together. It's one thing, and then it goes into its polarity. That's the only reason we get the toroidal field. It becomes one and it becomes two, but it's one and two all at once. That is the toroidal field. Electromagnetic energy is understood through the toroidal field. We have matter because it gives off an electromagnetic frequency, and the electromagnetic frequency is the very condensing down of scalar waves, or what we could probably even say we'll stick with scalar waves, but as they condense down, these scalar waves which move faster than the speed of time, they are not made of the same substance as our consciousness understands matter. They're not. This is going into dark energy and dark matter. But when the condensing down through the energetic fields, there are like bands, like a spectrum, and these bands filter the consciousness field as it's coming in. And as you shake it down, at the bottom you have the gold. And I guess it's like mining, you've got to get the big rocks out and then the bigger ones from there. And so the bigger pieces are filtered out. The bigger pieces, we're small pieces. The only thing that's left, if you go down to the atomic, it goes down smaller and smaller and smaller. So we are highly refined. When we say of the ultimate crystalline particles, there are bigger things going on in the higher realms, in the upper realms, the upper dimensions. And when I say upper, I mean inner as well. It's you can't quantify it. It's more of a quality. Okay, the problem with our minds is we can't comprehend the 3D reality. We can't comprehend it. It's very, very difficult, and therefore because we don't comprehend that, or gravity, or anything down to its ultimate truth, then the illusion is very, very strong. We have the illusion going on, and that's just the way it is. There's not much we can do about that. But this is what happens. The reason we have a toroidal field, going like this, it is an emanation of the formation of matter from not matter. Okay? So it's dark matter becoming, and prior to dark matter is another form previous to that. That's not filtered down, that so much is pulled out as it's filtered down the different consciousness levels. Dimensional levels, I will say. Density levels, not consciousness levels, because what's being filtered is consciousness itself. And so there is, and this refers also back to the ancient temple sciences of Egypt. The gods were called the netters. It's where we get the word nature from. It's the same place we get the word nature from. The netters are the ones that filter through this network, filters consciousness through, and there's big pieces of consciousness dimensions. Consciousness dimensions is probably a good word, that get filtered out. And so that's what brings us into this condensified, concretized being that we are. And so the Egyptian gods are just known as the netters. And there's good reason why, when you look at the story of Moses, he was strongly connected to Egypt, the knowledge of Egypt, very, very powerful. We don't want to go throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, look at that pun with Moses, right? He was thrown down the river and became, he was like the Christ that was sent, he was sent down the river, and it's the fates, the storyline, the mythology that becomes the very coding for our conscious experience. Coming back to my experience in the supermarket, don't worry, this is going to sort of go on a few episodes here for this. But that experience in the supermarket, talking to someone that I knew, but then when they told me that it was like a key was turned, I can't even remember really what they said. I do to a degree, but that's not important. Well, the final words that he said is, I had this dream, I had this vision, and he was a Christian. He said, and God said to go to the supermarket and say to this man, his life's about to change course majorly. And well, it did. He was correct about that. He was very correct about that. But of course, I went 2 years wondering what the hell had happened to me. Sharing my understandings of the cosmos through the lens of people's understanding, not my lens, not how I'd experienced it. Because I was still in my body and still grappling with my own personal human consciousness. I had a lot of hang-ups. If I knew my human design back then, I would have just spoken the truth. I would have just said it as it is. What the structures of the cosmos are, what they look like, how this whole thing functions. I can see it. I've had, especially in the last year, a very, very accelerated experience of the whole thing, bringing it all together, I guess, after 30 years of pondering and searching. And of course, I can't just bring out very, very heavy, I can't just go dropping bombs all the time. So I'm actually doing one thing, which is slowing it down right now because of what's been happening to me of recent, which is a very deep, deep spiritual battle. Fighting, there is fighting in the other dimensions and other realms. When you get into certain dimensional structures, there are places where there is no fighting, definitely. But there's plenty where there is. This isn't the only place where fighting happens, or discordance, or disruption, or, it's really simply when we have a distorted signal. That's all. The distortion is just a distorted signal. And that's why myself, as I do bioenergetic reset, which is the solfeggio frequencies with that drum that's behind my head there, that very powerful drum. It is amazing. Of course, the power of all my altar behind me. There are many things, everything's in its place, and everything in its angle and structure and direction in order for the highest vibration to be in this space for communication, healing, for rebalancing, resetting, whatever needs to be done. All the work, everything I've accumulated in my knowledge and understanding, spiritual journey, and musing and reflecting upon one's life journey, even in the acceleration, being able to look back, and now it seems so long ago now, because everything's been slowed right down for me at the moment, and realizing just how much you can slow it right down is very helpful, because then the stream of consciousness through the need to communicate becomes very, very strong, and the more I let go, the more the stream of consciousness just comes through and shares what has been stored in this particular hard drive, this hardware we could call it, and the software going right down into quarks and leptons and all of that sort of stuff, going into the quantum field of entanglement, where there is simply, if you go through, you could even come to the conclusion that everything is made of one particle that is in superposition, according to a program infrastructure. So, all of that, we can go so far deep into the complicated areas of spirituality and quantum physics and all that, because you can't separate the two. Physicists understood that. That's why they called it spooky science. When spooky science, we'll just call it spirituality then, because that's really all spirituality is spooky science. We want to be able to understand, and I'm experiencing it at the moment, the very slowing down of time allows you to become more acutely aware of what is. When you're more acutely aware of what is, then what has been and what is going to come is far less in the foreground, but definitely in the background. It becomes the background frequency, and then who you are, the actual functioning person, becomes that foreground frequency. That's where you're seen. You appear to be on the screen of your background, right? Look, there's the background. We're on the screen of the background, and the background is in front of me as well. That is the background of personal consciousness. Once we get to that point of understanding that what's going on is there's a witness, and then there is the background frequency, The body is understood as the interface, okay? So the body is as much a part of the background as it is a part of the inner architecture as well. So the consciousness crystal that you have, that's your consciousness crystal that you call I or identify with, which is still just a fractal of the entirety, but it belongs to a particular fractal first before it joins to other fractals. There is a placement. If you look like a puzzle, you can't just put it all together and just say, pile it together and say, there, it's together. It's not at its highest potential. It's not in its greatest effectiveness. But once you place everything in time, just like putting a motor together, you can't put the carburetor on, or you can't put the fuel injectors in until you've got the block and pistons in place. I mean, like there's a step-by-step process that takes place. But as I said before, the single particle, which also goes beyond time, if the more you come back to accessing the witness stream, then you can begin to know things that are already known, not just through the experience, but there's a connecting to the knowing of how to pull this apart and put it back together. This is where self-education takes place. And I know this because it's been my experience ever since that experience in the supermarket where this guy said to me my life was going to change, and God had told him. Well, I'll talk about that later, what God is. More understanding around that now. It makes so much more understanding, but we'll get to that bit at some point. I obviously had, at the time, I thought I was having an experience of God because everything disappeared. When he said this, he'd had this dream. And this, it's interesting because in the Bible it talks about that, right? People have these apparitions at night or in their dreams, and God sends someone to go tell someone something. That's what you call a prophet. I later saw this guy was definitely a prophet because he stood up in church a number of times, upsetting the apple cart. When I look back, people afterwards, typical Christians in an institution turning to each other and, oh, wasn't he silly to say such a silly bloody thing, Whereas what he said was very Elijah, Jeremiah kind of, Isaiah kind of material, John the Baptist kind of stuff. His name was James, in fact. And yeah, he was a Fruit Loop. And what I mean by that is that's by the standards of this world. By the standards of the judgmental mind. I saw that in the church. The church is in its institutional place, which has got nothing to do with Jesus, got nothing to do with Christ, because Christ said, I will build my church. Upon this rock, I will build my church. He called Peter the rock. But when he said upon this rock, he was talking about, he's like, Peter, you're getting there, mate. You're getting, called him, Peter means kind of little pebble, right? But then he's saying upon this rock, he's talking about himself, I call you Peter. You're like a stone. You're getting there. You're a little, you're almost getting there. But I shall build my church. And then what the Roman Catholic Church did is they actually went and built the basilica of their Luciferian industrialized institution. They went and built a basilica on top of St. Peter's bones. They took the words of Christ and they literally built a structure on top of Peter's bones. So when you go into that story and that mythology, there's great power in that, because you are you're actually delivering through on a truth, because that is a truth, but words cannot speak the truth. And that's also understood as well. The truth is in the understanding that happens to the consciousness that is witness to the words. Okay, so the understanding that comes to you is deeply, deeply programmed from an outside field. Now we're starting to get interdimensional, because it's like, well, where does the information come from? It comes from outside of you, but there's really actually nothing outside of you. So what we're getting is a regurgitation of knowing. So what is it that you need to know? What is it you need to understand? Through this knowing and understanding about good and evil, that one has to be straightened out first. Now, after my experience in the supermarket, that's what became a real test for me. It's like, what do I do here? Is it correct for me to seek God? Even the seeking seemed strange, because it was like I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't. And yet I found something. You know, I was lost, but now I'm found. And I'm not getting Christian here. I'm not for the institution. I'm not. I'm actually against the institution. And I know why too, because I'm a natural born anarchist. That doesn't mean anarchist in that anarchy is an attitude that's within my human design. It's how I landed. And so I have the incarnation cross of incarnation, which means my purpose, because that's incarnation. My purpose here is to actually help others and demonstrate what is the purpose. And that doesn't mean on a moral standing. It's getting across the depth of knowing what it means to be incarnate, to be in the flesh. That's my job. That's my role. I'm so grateful for human design, because it's like within the game matrix that I'm experiencing, I found a treasure box that had this map in it, and the map is this. Okay, as I look at the mythology of my life, as I look at the story unfolding, the anthology of Saddhanta, who used to be called Corey. You know, Corey being this very peculiar boy growing up, very creative, very expressive, but also very recluse and very misunderstood. Had a lot of, tendencies to probably towards the profane, because always seeking some kind of source of stimulation. And that could have been because of upbringing and not feeling like he was getting the stimulation that he needed for his vehicle he was in. Not little did he know that at the time. Like any child growing up, becoming so very identified with the body, so very identified with the mind. Whereas my knowing of it now is, if I'd known that as a child, that I'm not my body and I'm not even my mind, I am an experience. I am an experience, and that has nothing, an experience has nothing to do with morals. Even though you may experience something that is less than favorable, does not mean anything or have an indictment upon you. It's not that you are out of control. It is that there is a program, there is a system, there is a whole matrix going on within this movie game. The difference here is, this is not like gaming as we understand it. The very terrain that we're learning to master is a personality consciousness. That is the witness. Is the navigating, which is keeping your hands off. That's the hardest thing, right? Of the body. The interface. And so all that we're really here to do is understand the interface, which is the body, and how, if you can understand that as your dashboard of this vehicle that you're flying through space and time, supposedly, right? Space and time, which is just a dimensional expression of reality. It's not the reality itself. Once we understand that the consciousness is here to be witness to this interface, then it does come down to, as we say in human design, it comes down to decision making. But that it's not about the doing. Okay, you decide and that's it. Which button to push. Okay, that's it. And then you don't get about doing it. The body gets about doing it. That's the consciousness that it is here to decipher, because there's what's going on outside of the interface is only what our dials are showing us. It's only what our internal dials are allowing us to see. And so when I can see that, the biggest piece is to go into the navigation of the body. But you don't want to get too stuck on just, making decisions. you don't want to be unconscious in your decisions, but you don't want to be forcing your decisions. And so you need to be witness to the decision that is being made, because that is also part of the program and the illusion. In order for you to move through the time and space correctly, the program has literally like because of your mechanical and geometric structure, how you are formed to be through a biology, through a form of biology, in the essence of Newtonian physics. In order for you to be able to do that correctly, is to simply understand how the body gives the feedback of the outside environment, which is your consciousness is just as much in contact with the body as the outer world is in contact with the body. When you get to the atomic level, you realize nothing's touching anything. Nothing is actually touching anything, because the binding force of this 3D reality is space itself. We get all tied up with matter and forget that space is actually the conduit. Space is actually where all the work is done. That's why the monks and all that, we think they're doing nothing. We think they're not up to anything. They're just sitting there meditating. I'm telling you, they're doing more than you are. You're at kindergarten. You're still pushing little cars along. You're still building little castles in the sand. Do you see what I mean? Look, I've had all of that. I've built the castles in the sand. But when they talk about building castles in the sky, well, that's where the money shot is. I can tell you right now, okay? The reason I'm sharing this is we don't want to take it for granted that we're going to get a chance to tell our story. We don't. We don't want to take it for granted that we're going to get a chance to tell our story. So here's mine, because it's very interesting. I'm telling my story because it goes very, 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 very deep on so many levels, and yet it's so superficial as well. But the superficial expression is simply an indication of higher realms, higher forces, deeper knowings, greater consciousness. My pancreas right now, I'm very, very unwell, believe it or not, right now. My body, I should say, the vehicle is taking a massive hit. I haven't done anything wrong. Even the doctors are saying there's no reason for your body to be doing what it's doing. I want to issue you a warning. Be very, very careful of what you wish for, because you just might get it all. That was, I've heard that in a song by Daughtry called Home. Be careful what you wish for. I do like that song. You just might get it all. Now, because you see, what we wish for, the things that are wished for, are wished by this construct that we make up in the experience we're having of this world. But it's not true to the program, and it's not true to our personality consciousness or the design consciousness, for that matter. The design being, the atomic structure of the interface that the witness, the non-physical, is having of this. As I say, I call it an interface, because it's reading the outside realm, which is only an illusion as well. There's nothing outside. Nothing outside. There's no thing outside. It's only because we're witnessing, as quantum physics has worked out, it's only because there is a witness that it is concretized. Okay, that solves the problem there of quantum physics. Human design solves the problem of quantum physics, because the witness is a binary. It is the opposite of what is being witnessed. So what we are is a binary consciousness, two forms of one kind of consciousness. There is only consciousness, okay, but it's expressing itself in two ways, like in geometry, okay, but a geometry in the form of matter, and in the matter of form, and then another geometry, which is perceived, only perceived, but not seen. So it is the understanding side of the thing that does not understand, and yet there's no separateness. There is no separateness. That is an illusion. But nonetheless, We would not be having an experience without the duality. That's why everything comes back down to the yin and the yang. Everything always goes back. That's why it's the most powerful symbol. You know, I can see in my life a very mundane beginning, very like, yeah, there was all sorts in my early childhood. There was violence, there was stress, there was questioning what the fuck is this. I mean, looking back, it makes a lot more sense. As you get towards the end of the movie begins to make more sense. The mythology of the experience you came to have begins to wrap itself up. Well, you know, truly at 50, it's only just begun, but I've myself had intel, or have seen, but through just conscious awareness, that anything can happen really, really, really quickly. You can be just gone like that. I'm not saying that the timelines can't be shifted. It's just which one are you experiencing? You don't shift the timelines. Your consciousness shifts within timelines. And that does not mean you're in control. It only changes through awareness. And awareness is not control. Awareness is not control. Don't ever forget that. What's happening with me now is, you know, I'm in so much pain, constant pain, excruciating, deep, very visceral pain. It's in my neck, it's in my organs, and it's also just, you know, like a holistic kind of numbness going through the body that I'm witness to. What I'm also aware of through my mythology and my story, but I can't get too hung up on, is what's going on in other dimensions, other unseen dimensions. That what this is made of, what's going on where the larger pieces have been left behind, the larger rocks as it's been sifted through by the netters being the gods, sifting consciousness down to this form. Tiny particles, as you move up into the larger particulates, they are in different dimensions. They filter out. And once you access into those dimensions, yes, things are, you have an awareness, a much, much bigger scale. But again, it's relative. It's relative. Okay, so once you are in the consciousness of those higher scale realities and consciousness, once you're aware of it, it's just the same size as what we're experiencing here. It applies the same as you go into the smaller and the more minute, the infinitesimal. Once you get to those points, once you climatize to that, it's relative to what is huge, what is big. That's the macrocosm, microcosm. And so as a child, I had the experience. I had early on the first experience I remember where I became aware of other dimensions and other worlds and other spaces, and it's very hard to put into words. It would have been around maybe about the age of 3. And there was another instance prior to that where I became very afraid of the sky and the clouds in it, because it showed me just how distorted just a perspective can be, because the mind is simply the clear blue sky and the clouds are just coming and going. And so this understanding that my reality wasn't fitting, there was a question at a very early age of reality and what it is. It's always been there, but if I'd had the correct education as a young one, I would have known and understood what was happening. I can look back now and see. Hindsight's a beautiful thing, and that's your mythology as well, looking back over the story. So there were things, understandings that came to me, a golden cross that comes into my consciousness as well at a young age. I was not raised in the church. I was not religious, so to speak. But again, in hindsight, I can see that spirituality, I mean, what was difficult was reality, what we call reality, which is actually existence. This existence was the difficulty, not my consciousness. But of course, that gets turned on you very quickly. So I was dyslexic, classed as dyslexic, and I could feel not particularly liked by my teachers. As I cast my consciousness back now, I can see the pain and difficulty that there's a 444 coming up. There we go. yeah, the pain and difficulty of being human, but also now understanding through human design the pain and difficulty of being a 6-3 projector. The incarnation cross of incarnation. See, those with an incarnation cross of incarnation can easily mistaken and mix up their previous lives with this one. And it's not that you forget who you are, it's that there's a deep confusion of your placement in space-time. A deep confusion because there's this knowing of consciousness that doesn't seem to fit. So as you go through the educational system, you're very much torn down to a very simplistic, once again, kind of, it's the world doing what the netters have done to get us in this form and experience within space-time. As they sift us through, they sift out the larger parts of consciousness, and the more tinier particulates of consciousness are left, and then here we are. There's an imprinting, a program that's put in there as well. I guess you call it like a it's something that something sits in. It's like it's an environment. The word will come to me, and that placement in space, they try to replicate that as the netters have brought us into physical consciousness. Then and what we call the gods. Then the system here, of course, there's this binary. There has to be good. There has to be bad. But there has to be morality, because there also has to be non-morality, and that's the only way we can be here as well. So morality is a funny thing, but it's not anything we have to, it's just something for us to understand, okay, not to live by. And that can be very difficult to get across. Even just saying that can throw people off the mark. But it is the binary, that is very, very important to understand when it comes to why we get thrown off track. Because the educational system, which some would say is part of the elite, Freemasonry, Illuminati, on and on, well, that is still us as well. That is it's an illusion that it is not a part of us. The most heinous things, the most beautiful things are of the same thing. That it's a spectrum, and it's a duality, and it can't be done away with. In order for us to understand what is beautiful, then we have to know what is good and bad, because beauty has this draw towards it, and so morality, good and bad, still just not good enough for an explanation. It will never give us the depth of understanding of what it means. We get so stuck with the moral side of it, we think we understand what good and bad is, good and evil. They're just a binary, but they give us the experience of emotions. They give us it. Without the good and the bad, we wouldn't have the emotional experience. That's another sifting down of consciousness. We're on the rebound now, where our consciousness is going to shift. The emotional center will shift us into our solar plexus, into a deeper sense of the closer realities. To we're retrieving back some of the bigger pieces of our consciousness, which is direct knowing, which we would say is the new emotion. The wave goes away. The reason we're emotional beings is it moves in a wave, and a wave goes like that. It's an oscillation. You can't just be happy. You oscillate between happiness and sadness, but you wouldn't know what happiness and sadness was if there was no good and evil. So good and evil is a necessary part for us in order to actually have an experience. A lot of Christians don't know what they're talking about when it comes to good and evil. And so the way in which good and evil is birthed into place is through judgment, and that's where we get the mythology and the story of the eating of the fruit. It's also where we get the story of the prodigal son, which I'll see if I can get into this today. The prodigal son is about the son who leaves his home and comes back. If we look at the Garden of Eden, we have man, which is just and then they divide into two, which is how conception works, right? It's like there really is. It's an illusion that they're divided. They're of the same thing. Adam and Eve are simply the splitting of the cells that happen from the egg fertilization of the egg and conception. When we conceptualize something, conceptualizing is the splitting of the one. Conceptualizing is just bringing those two apart. Opposedly, you see, that's an illusion. It's not actually. So people get hung up on gender and all that sort of thing. They need to go and have a relax and a cup of tea, because it's just you're looking at I'm sorry, but your consciousness is just very, very, very dense. You can have a far more settled and expansive consciousness if you let go of that superficial stuff, right? And so Adam and Eve, they're actually one being, come into the illusion of the two. And then to bring in the true experience that allows for the growth into the emotional awareness of spirit, because it's the only way in which we can understand spirit, is it comes through the emotional center of the solar plexus. It's not just the crown, but to bring those two together of crystallization and spirit, of form and the informed and the form, and the that which is non-material, to bring the material and the non-material together, the masculine and feminine. In order for that to happen, we have to have a divide that is to do with some kind of moral standing. How can matter understand morality? How can non-matter understand reality? Not reality, morality. Think about it. Morality is a very, 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 very interesting harmonic. Morality is the space between matter and non-matter. It's very, very interesting. So emotion is space itself. It's an oscillation only. It's not in form, but it's also not non-existent. What is it that oscillates? Well, the oscillation itself is what oscillates. So we're getting away from form, and that's how we feel and experience the emotional realm. As we're going through this consciousness shift as human beings, because we started with a spleen, which was when everything was far more dense. We had 3 centers, 5 centers. So we started with 3, which is getting just into very, very basic mammalian mechanics, and then we evolved according to the program, in alignment with the heavenly cosmic bodies. The imprints began to change the fractal vibration, and so with that fractal vibration shifting, we get what's called mutation. And we went into mutation as a 5-centered being into 7, and then that's where from there we had access to, there was this 90,000 year continual forming of the Ajna center. So 90,000 years, beings were trying to access deeper understanding of the binary awareness center, this cognitive experience center. So the spleen was very dense. It was about survival. The spleen, just through smelling, the organism was able to survive by just slightly tasting or smelling. The spleen, that had its own conscious awareness. That's how the being would survive in the condensified reality. And then there was the advent of the cognitive binary, which we call the third eye, or the ajna. And then from there we went to, we got access to that third eye, but building the access to the third eye and the solar plexus. Then another mutation came along, which brought us into the 9-centered being, which is a far higher level of consciousness. There's no need to try and open this ajna, this cognitive awareness center, because we are cognitive, we are, and far more aware of that means we become our own authority. We're not just trying to survive as a tribe. We now begin to survive and know ourselves as an individual. And the placement of then the mutation and placement of the solar plexus, coming into that 9-centered structure, the solar plexus holding this emotional wave, which is going through a mutation, has started back in 1781. We're moving to the fruition of that in 2007, and so that makes us an interregnum, We are, only 250-year long cycle of a being we call Homo sapien in transitus. We're an interregnum in that we are the one experiencing the emotional wave with awareness as well. It's a half awareness center, half emotional wave center. It used to be just an emotional wave center. It was just emotions, and it was more connected to the sacral and its emotional effect. So as the emotional energies moved from the sacral chakra into the solar plexus, was because we had a different structure of the nine-centered being coming into play, which was born out of the seven-centered being. But the level of consciousness of the sacral, which is the had emotions very, very much attached to it, shifted up the vertical power column into the solar plexus, and the solar plexus now having the more advanced level of emotional awareness. The sacral no longer holds the emotional. It does to a degree, has a strong connection through the solar plexus, but that's through sex. It's through sex, because the solar plexus is all about emotion, and the sacral is all about energy. And so it's that energy, that vital life force energy and emotion mixed together. Well, that's what we call lovemaking, right? It's the sexual, romantic kind of, that's something that came more into the scene as well. I'm not saying that there wasn't romance beforehand, but it took on a whole different understanding. How we mate, how we come together, how we court each other, is because of the structure that we are now, nine-centered being with higher awareness than the seven-centered being, and a half motor, half awareness center, emotional center. Now that will become a full spiritual awareness. So emotions will become, for the new beings over time as they're born through after 2027, they're going to access emotions differently. It's actually going to be more about direct knowing without needing to go into sex and being romantic and all of that sort of thing. It's less judgmental. It's all based on correctness. It's all based on electromagnetic geometry coming together and forming correctly, with just knowing it. What we have to go through is this whole pheromone, Neanderthal mindset, hunting down, men still like, still like fucking cavemen hunting women at times. We've advanced so much further along, but our consciousness has been dampened down by the very distortion of the program itself. So everything we're experiencing that we call evil is a distortion of the program itself. Distortion is not bad, but it doesn't come across as it appears to be. It comes across as it appears to be, but not as it actually is. Okay, so we don't actually see things the way they are. As a young child, I saw things the way they are. Fast forward nearly 50 years, and here I am having this experience out in this sacred land at this festival I was working at, lying on this sacred land, leaving the body completely, really, it's not a good term, but let's just go with that, leaving the body to the sounding of this incredible gong, this gong being sound in this amphitheater of beautiful terrain that I was lying on. Nighttime, looking at the sky through the branches of the trees, and all of a sudden becoming the reflection that I was looking at. Becoming the reflection that I was looking at. So deeply, deeply profound. And of course there was a part of that where I allowed the mind, there was still a little anchoring to this space in the mind, realizing that I had lost myself within the consciousness stream once again, that the movie I was watching was me not realizing that I am a witness consciousness with a vehicle wanting to have a particular stream or direction for its geometry. And my thinking, my mind, my personality toying with the truth of what I am. I was experiencing this life from every other life I'd lived. I mean, I want you to let that sink in for a moment. I was experiencing this life, this being here, from every other life that I lived. I was consciously aware of all of those, but seeing this, I was not consciously aware of this life. I couldn't be, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to witness it. There was still an anchoring, there was still that silver cord there that allowed me to be able to perceive that's what was going on, but it was very difficult to get back in my body, and there was a whole ritual and process that took place after that. Beautiful beings that could see that I was in a distressed place of trying to reintegrate my personality consciousness with my body consciousness. That was very, very, very tricky. But I had done it before. I realized that through past life awareness. I had done this before, hence how it happened again. But of course, you can't look at that from a linear time scale. It was very, very it can't be put into words. It simply can't. And so for today, I'm going to leave it there, just as I saw 1, 0, 1, 1, 1. They're just all those ones. I know this story is just beginning. There's tales of mythology in my experience that go into all that's ever been thought of and known. I've experienced those past lives. I've experienced other realms. I've experienced other planets, but they're other dimensions. I've experienced incredible things, and I'm sharing this because you just never know when you don't, and you won't get the chance to share the mythology of who you are. You just don't know when. And the way I'm sharing it is dotted and coloured on a quantum level. That's why I'm going here, there, and everywhere, because I'm sharing my knowledge as I share my story, because the knowledge I know is who I have always been. My story only has the page that it is written on, because the very consciousness itself is the awareness that is witnessing the story. Well, I do hope that you enjoyed that. I'm sure your mind is spinning, but we've only just begun. Well, until next time, bye for now.